Thank you very much, Rafael. Way too many words for that, but and thanks for having me, and thanks St. Thomas Law School for putting this on and opening this up. The rain slowed me down, but I made it time to at least catch most of the first day.
One of the things, when you and I talked the other day on the phone, the conversation was around, this is blockchain in government, and a lot of the conversations that are had, whether it's at Consensus or Bitcoin 2025 or at the Bitcoiners Minneapolis meetups or in the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative monthly meetups, the conversation is about sort of what's passable, right? And Brandon talked about that. There's a timeline, right? There's the things that we've done so far. There's what we hope for in the future. But you and I really kind of landed on what has been done and how we got there. Because when we first started, right, these conversations were really hard. You talk about blockchain and they say, oh, that's how people buy drugs or those monkey pictures, right? And I'm like, oh, this conversation is not going to go well. And you've got like 7.5 minutes with the rep or the senator, and they're glazing over. How is it that you guys from South Dakota, which in a lot of ways is very similar to Minnesota, how did you guys go about starting to have those conversations and then getting that buy-in? There's some states who are doing better than others, and I would say objectively South Dakota has gotten far better participation rates from the people in charge, right, the powers that be. How have you gone about having these conversations that are difficult, that are technical, and keeping them approachable and getting people to understand and give you the nod and then participate in helping your state pass legislation? And then what types of things have you guys passed? Maybe give us a quick history of the South Dakota Association and what you guys have been able to accomplish.
Okay, very big question. I think that the first thing is South Dakota is different in that we don't have very many people. We got a lot of land. We are certainly not purple. That also makes things a little bit easier to accomplish. I will kind of go a little personal to tell you how I got into this. I was teaching in Buena State University down in Northwest Iowa, and I was teaching an adjunct class. I had a student that was doing a project on the dark web. He was kind of a problem student on some level, but he piqued my curiosity, and he got me interested in blockchain and interested in Bitcoin and understanding that. And that was 14, 15 years ago. It was quite a while ago. So I fell down the hole that most of you all probably fallen down. And then I got to South Dakota, and I moved with my family there. I merged my firm with a larger firm, and so we ended up sitting in Sioux Falls instead of Northwest Iowa. And I had an opportunity in the Bar Association to get on a digital asset subcommittee of the business group. And the reason that they put that together is there had been some legislation that had been proposed in South Dakota that, I will look back on it. And the only reason that they had it was to say, hey, we're South Dakota and we like digital assets. It was kind of junk. It just made noise, so to speak, which, was valuable in the sense that somebody was making noise and trying to talk about this, but the bill itself didn't do anything. Arguably, I'm sure the people that wrote it thought it did great things, and so I shouldn't say that. But what it made me realize is, there's nobody really thinking about what are the steps we need to take to get adaptation, to get access, to really think about the possibility. Because like the speakers that were up here before, my mind is way out into the future of the future of what this can do and the power that the blockchain has, not only in government and voting and finance, but in everything and all of the things that we can all imagine. But we can't get there without getting to the next step. So I had a good friend from undergrad who ended up in Switzerland, and he was one of the founders of the Crypto Valley Association, which Rafael mentioned. Would encourage all of you to take a look at the structure of how they built their organization. But they didn't build it easily. I was fortunate to say, hey, what are the things you did and you didn't do well? First it was Bitcoin and beers, that everybody got together, and anybody that walked in the door could sign up, and anybody that wanted to give them a couple bucks for pitchers of beer, they were now signatories on it, and they had some bad actors that got in early that they had to eventually clean out. So a lot of good advice for us that we were able to use. The other good thing about South Dakota is we have a very very large trust industry. We've got trust laws that promote secrecy, and it's very well regulated. But trust companies, that by their nature, are very conservative animals, and things like Bitcoin and digital assets and cryptocurrency scared them. But they had very rich clients that said, "We want you to hang on to our digital assets." And they said, "We don't want to hang on to digital assets." They said, "Well, I have $100 million worth of digital assets." Like, oh, boy, I want to, but how are we going to do that? How are we going to pull that off? And so we started some summits with the Trust Association. And we said, this is your problem. How do you custody these things that you're comfortable with, that regulators are comfortable with? And that, I remember our first summit we had it at Dakota State University, which is one of the top cybersecurity universities in the country. How do when we walk out of there, we have to define custody, define who owns it. Luckily, about the same time, the UCC 12, Article 12, which, again, if you haven't looked at that or thought about that, I would encourage you to do it. It's boring law. It's 147 pages of law that was written by some very brilliant professors that we were lucky enough to get down to South Dakota. So we were going to be one of the first ones to pass it. Right as it got to the governor's desk in South Dakota, some misinformation was kind of pulled up around it, and it ended up getting vetoed, and we had to come back around again. But the good thing for us is all of a sudden the bankers who brought that bill, because they wanted some way to lend against this asset, because we also have lots of banks in South Dakota. So they thought this was a great idea. Again, I don't know that they understood it, but once they ran into problems, they said, "Hey, you guys know about this," and so they pulled us up. So it moved us up the chain of people that listen to us. Again, we kind of got a little less on the fringe and a little more into one particular issue. So, I don't want to just tell my story. I want to answer the question that Rafael asked me. The other huge thing was I got involved with Blockchain Coalition and Ari, who I can't give enough praise to. You mentioned who's in charge of the Washington State group. She obviously is a little better funded than us. She has Amazon and Microsoft and everybody else in Washington State that sees the future of the future. But that allowed us to, every month we get together and we say, what's going on in your state? And I've become the guy that's talking about custody for trust companies and banks, because that's my problem. You're here. We've Texas talks about mining quite a bit, but so everybody kind of has their flavor, and we all learn from each other. And a big reason that became powerful is because the feds weren't doing it. The feds were not telling us this is how you custody assets. And so the state said, well, we got to know. We've got $100 million here that we got to know. Are we holding this right? How is a court battle going to come out if somebody's making a claim to this asset and somebody else is making an opposing claim? Now that's changed. We got Fit 20. The other thing in South Dakota, we've got a small federal delegation. We've only got 3 people, 2 senators, 1 representative. And lucky for us, our rep was a signator on the Fit 21 bill and is in the ag side. Thune, who's now the majority leader, has had us in his office several times. Rounds is on the banking commission. So we've had their voice, and we've been able to voice, hey, these are the things that we think are interesting, and they ask us their opinions. So that's really nice. Yeah, Emmer, who is a huge leader on the federal side. So, I think we're lucky here in the Midwest that people listen a little bit better to us than if we were from California. Our colleague from California will often sit on a meeting and say, well, I talked to somebody today and they shut me down, or, how many times has she gotten something that she'd worked on for 2 years to the verge of getting passed, and then somebody throws a big bucket of water on it and she hasn't gotten anywhere. So, we're sitting in a really unique place. We're sitting in the middle of the country. I think in a big way, we're protected from a lot of these forces that are going to be focused other places. We have, I always say about people from the Midwest, I mean, we have progressive common sense. We're looking for new ways to do things, but we're not going to do it in a way that doesn't make sense, that doesn't occur to us to say this is something that works and something that we need. One thing that I often see, and when you get talking about this, we go to the future of the future and we lose who we're talking to. So I've answered your question almost as long as the question that was asked. So I'll turn it back since this is a chat.
Yeah, that reminds me of there's a book, Mastering His Adversary, by Dr. Ian McGilchrist, and one of the things he talked about is the map is not the territory. And we can talk about what the vision is and what the future is, and part of the way that I got involved in this was, I'm pretty shy, I'm pretty introverted, and I have a hard time talking. So
he likes hats.
Yeah, I like hats. But I'm a recovering banker. I'm a former oil and gas executive, and I realized that if you're not speaking the colloquialisms of the people in the room, or you're not speaking specifically to what it is that they're interested in, they don't have enough time to give you to understand it. And so one of my attorneys guys here, a friend of mine, he's heard me say this a million times before, but I always ask people when we're talking about anything, whether it's crypto or blockchain or exponential technology, what does it do? How do you build a business? How does your business create a solution? How do you monetize that solution? And then when people pay you for that solution, your business makes revenue, right? It's not based on the value of some arbitrary token, et cetera, going up for your business to be valuable. What does it do? And my joke is, when I'm talking to politicians, or I work all the way up to the United Nations, and a lot of this is because I need to know what's happening in these rooms so that when we come back to the state, we can see what worked, right? We have these conversations. So the group that we're on together is a federal blockchain coalition. So almost every state, we have 49 out of 50. We just got Hawaii, and the conversation is, let's share best practices, right? What are PDFs or what are letters that you use to get a meeting with senators, representatives, the banking commission, the financial commission, the ag commission, that have got you in the door to have a conversation about what we can do with this technology? And my joke is, I always need either shit you can click or shit you can kick, right? So it's got to be either some sort of physical product, right? Mining is a great example. People can get their head around that. It's very easy to fund and finance. And then, tools. Brandon talked about the L2s, the UX. How are we making it easier for people to move forward? And I think what we need at the state level is that regulatory clarity. But we're not going to get that if we don't get an understanding of what it is that we're talking about. One of the things that I saw shared in the group was Pennsylvania has actually put up a proposal to be the first state in the U.S. to get a Bitcoin reserve. And I believe they've gotten it through the House. They're trying to get it through the Senate. From a lawyer's perspective, right? What happens if it goes to court? What is the Hornbook law, right? What is the very specific black and white version of what it is that we need to know to move forward with this? What type of things do you hope to see going forward, right? We're in a transition stage here post-election. What are we going to see, and what are lawyers hoping to see? What are sort of bankers hoping to see soon that will help us maybe move one step forward? Not future the future, but what would you like to see that would maybe help you, whether it's in South Dakota or from a legal background, in the next 6 to 12 months, 18 months, how government works?
Well, I mean, yeah, I know how government works, and in the sense that we have some tailwinds. That's very important. One of the biggest things I think happened this year is at Bitcoin Nashville, we had a CLE with 55 attorneys that were focused on these issues. That was the biggest group of attorneys that had ever gotten together to say, hey, how are we doing this? What are you doing? How are we going through these processes? Because most of this is education. I mean, we're at a level that very few people that I talk to, and I mean, I was just at a kind of reunion, a football game. I went to the University of Iowa for undergrad. I went to U of M for my MBA, so don't hate me too much. But these are very smart, very accomplished people. And I just got back from speaking at ALA, and they said, boy, I just don't get it. And I kind of think to myself, man, haven't you been curious enough to stop yourself and go through the process of understanding what the blockchain is all about? But they haven't. And there's a lot of people that haven't. And so, this is going to push it forward. We need to take the fear away from it, right? I mean, if we say to them, hey, we're gonna take over the Federal Reserve with the Bitcoin Reserve, that's gonna put a lot of people's taxes up. We don't need to do that. We don't need. There's plenty of ways to establish a Bitcoin Reserve that doesn't go out and swamp the market. We do have market power. The government does have market power. Those things again are going to cause problems. I think of myself as at the on-ramp, off-ramp of digital and fiat currency. That's where I'm going to operate probably for a majority of my life, in helping regulators handle that space, and then eventually helping industry regulate that space. Because I have a good friend that a banker that I run with, 2-3 times a week, and we have long conversations about this. And bankers are scared to death. That we're taking away, if we get a true Bitcoin reserve, we're taking away the levers of the Federal Reserve to control our monetary policy. Now, I believe there's ways that we handle that in different ways, but to them, everything they've learned, you're saying, well, we're going to change that. And they're not unpowerful people. They're not people that don't have some influence in the world. The place that I always think about that this is so ripe for disruption with blockchain is insurance, is understanding how, the people that really understand the risk of what's happening, that are living in it. I often give this example of the South Dakota cattle industry. If you can maintain the risk of that industry in itself, it's going to take so much of the volatility out of the market, because all the parties within that market are going to take the risk as it goes up and down. Anyway, I get a little bit on the soapbox, but when you find somebody, and I get a cattle farmer that is subject to cattle futures, which I get oil guys that are telling me when they get into the cattle futures, like, that is crazy. You're going from losing everything to making $1 kajillion in 2 weeks. It's almost impossible to get your head around. And you say to them, hey, I've got a real way that we could look at this risk and hedging this risk. And they're all ears, right? So you've got to find that point that they're in. And like you said, click it, kick it, but something that they understand. And you ask them in a way that they understand, and they say, oh. And they're usually pretty strongly held beliefs. A good friend that I was talking to last week, who is a very, very active money manager, bond trader, everything else, he said, well, we've got all the exchanges. What do we need the blockchain for? I said, well, how much does it cost to maintain the New York Stock Exchange? Well, he said, billions. So there's billions of opportunity to make more efficiency there. Billions of dollars that we could make more efficient by 1% of that, that we move into a blockchain and trading those assets on blockchain instead of in a current exchange. It's, we don't have to take over the world today. And, when we talk about taking over the world, we can alienate ourselves. So it is talking about those real practical problems that we see every day, that, as a lawyer, I see every day, as business people, we see every day. And then, thinking about them like you do with the coders in here and the people that, whoever came up with Bitcoin, Satoshi, whoever it was, man, thinking through that problem, that all the way to the end, that's super inspiring. And so, if we're in here and we're not tilting at windmills, but we're really thinking, how do we take these really hard problems and take them to that next level? That's a lot of fun, and that's why I love hanging out with people that think like that.
I appreciate that. So we've established so far that you can be trader, lawyer, cattle farmer, or a voter, and blockchain somehow affects your life. And I think that that's really formative here because so many people only think of it as a one-trick pony because it started as a synthetic derivative speculative asset. And then as people learn more and more about blockchain, and I don't want to keep saying Bitcoin, but realistically, that's sort of the one that inspired it all, obviously. But there's so many tools and things that we can do that I just hope that some of you guys here are inspired based on the projects you're working on, outside edge use cases. I really appreciate it. Do we have any questions? Do we have time? I'm trying to check where we're at. Guys, anybody have one question? We're not going to run the mic out, but I will say this: we have attorneys in the room from lots of different states. If you have a business especially in this space, always have an attorney. But do you guys have any questions in general about state regulation in South Dakota, anything like that?
I do. So, when you compare the progress we've made in South Dakota to the progress we've made, or the lack thereof, legislatively here in Minnesota, do you, where do you think Minnesota could start to catch up? And do you think it's at risk as a state of falling behind by not being more proactive legislatively as a state?
Well, I mean, another advantage of South Dakota is, again, this is a little history lesson. Most of the credit card companies in the country are based in South Dakota for a good reason. We've got very streamlined banking regulations, so we don't have a lot of things to fix as far as doing it. And the first bill that I talked about was a way to try to fix things that didn't need to be fixed. Wyoming, which is a very progressive state on digital assets, had to revamp their entire banking system. And it's still, when you're remodeling a house, it's never as good as a brand new one. So we had a very, very bare bones. So Minnesota's got a lot of baggage, which makes it difficult, certainly, to think about. Now, they also have good relationships with South Dakota, relationships there, banking relationships there. I do think their social services, so if you're thinking about the voting side of this thing, then you can think about how do we create a digital ID that is meaningful? I mean, that's really the most powerful thing, in my view, that the government can do. It's scary because now, everything that you ever touches that, but if you can control it, if your private key is the only way that accesses that thing, and you can put your medical information, you can put all of your government benefits information, you can put everything into that one thing that, is only you, and you can biometrically have access to it or whatever that thing is. It's huge. And I think in Minnesota, there's much more structure around individual rights than in South Dakota. So go to your strengths. Go to the thing that you've already got and enhance that. Don't try to become us. I mean, again, Wyoming tried to become us in the sense we didn't have to do anything, and they're struggling to get over there. Again, they've got a lot of things that we don't have. So, we all learn from each other. So that would be my advice in Minnesota. Find the thing that makes Minnesota unique, and how can blockchain enhance that uniqueness? Again, I think individual rights are something. I'm a Minnesota lawyer. I lived up here for a number of years. I've worked in the city. So, I mean, that's the sense that I think you're going to get a lot of resonation when you bring that out to the Minnesota people, saying, hey, we're here to defend individual rights and individuality. And we're going to do that by giving you control over your information, what you disclose, when you disclose it, how you disclose it. It's huge, right? So I don't know if that's helpful, but I would definitely, and I'd love to think about it. It's fun.
I love that. Brandon called it blending. I think you kind of implied sort of a braiding of the old with the new, so there's not a harsh off ramp. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.